So first I'm going to target the main content area and specify that it should float to the left. And now you can see it automatically reduces. Now, keep in mind, there is no dedicated width here. It's going to take up all available space that it requires. So for example, main content heading, watch what happens if we come back. And if I were to duplicate that to make a longer heading, it's going to take up all of that space as well. So that might be okay for you, but probably you want to have a very specific width. If we come back to style.css, our wrap is 600 pixels. So why don't we specify a width for our main content area of 500 pixels. Now if I come back and refresh, it's taking up exactly 500 pixels regardless of how wide our headings are. And now that I look at this, I'm thinking our sidebar is a little bit too narrow. So why don't we fix that? Come back and let's make the width of our content area 450 instead. Refresh. And now because we floated our main content to the left and specified a width, anything below it will jump up. The next step is we want to simulate more of an actual website, and it's difficult to do so when you don't have much content. So why don't we adjust the height of each of these so that we can see a little bit more. Here, I'm going to target the content and the aside, and we're going to set the height to 600 pixels. Now, we need to note two things here, but first, let's make sure it works. Refresh. And sure enough, the height has been increased. Now, number one, rather than pasting height in here and here, we can reduce that by targeting both elements using a comma. And next, you want to stray away from using heights. Very, very rarely will you use an actual height on especially a wrapping element. And that's because you want to let your content determine what the height is. In a real website, you wouldn't want all of this spacing down below. Also, as soon as this content takes up all of the 600 pixels, it may be cut off. So in general, try not to use heights on your layout, but it's okay in this case so that we have something to work with. Next, I want you to take note of these bullets here. Why does it seem as if they're coming outside of the sidebar? I'm going to right-click and choose Inspect Element in Google Chrome. And if I hover over the URL, I want you to note how it seems as if it's taking up space within the main content area as well. If I hover over the list item, you'll see the same effect. And this is something you should be careful with. If we're floating the content area, and this is being pushed up, why don't we float the aside as well? And I'm going to float that one to the left, or you could also do the right. In this case, we can push it up to the left as well. That's better. And now you can see if we hover over it, it's only taking up that specific area as it should. Next, I see that the list items are pushed over to the edge, and we don't want that. Why don't we make them line up with the sidebar? And the reason they're pushed over is, again, because that browser is applying some defaults for you. Now, this is easy to trip you up at first because you don't know what is being applied by default. In this case, it's adding padding left to the unordered list. So I'm going to revise that by setting padding left to 0, and I need to make sure I only target the unordered list that is within the aside element. Refresh, and now that's being pushed back over. And if you wanted, you could adjust it slightly, so you could maybe make it 18 in this case. Or if you wanted to get rid of the bullets entirely, you could say list style, what kind of style for the list elements, and we're going to say no styling at all, and that will get rid of the bullets entirely. And then if we adjusted the padding left back to 0, that'll push it up against the edge like so, and you have the beginnings of what would be an actual website. Now, I want you to note if we try to resize this, it stays the same width no matter what. What if you wanted it to adjust? Well, another way is to use percentages to declare your width. So why don't we try it this time? And I'm going to say I want the width of the wrapper to be 80% of the width of our entire browser window. Next, here, I'm going to set the width of our content area equal to perhaps 70% of this containing element. And then I'm going to set the aside, and we'll keep that like so for the time being. Now if I refresh, I can resize and notice that the elements will resize as I adjust the browser window.